Hello, everybody. This is Brian Ankney with AutoSuccess Magazine and Babcock's Media. I'd like to welcome you all to our webinar today. Actually, we've got a very special guest. Joe and I have known each other for so long, I'm not going to say it, but Joe High is the Senior Vice President of Team Velocity Marketing, and today we're going to talk about implementing Google's Dealer Playbook. Before we get started with that, I'd like to invite you guys to join a group. We've got a group on Facebook called AutoSuccess Webinars. You just type that into the search bar on on Facebook. It'll come up, request to join the group. Now, once you're a member of that group, there's a few benefits. You can interact with our guests. You can interact with our AutoSuccess staff. You can recommend future topics or future guests that you'd like to see. Now, most importantly, you can interact with each other because you're all going to try some new things. You're going to have successes and failures, and if we share with each other, we can all get there quicker. So please join the group if you haven't already, and if there's other people in the dealership that you think could benefit, please invite them to join the group and, of course, attend more of these webinars. Now, for questions, we're going to hold the questions until the end of the webinar. And what I would like you to do as we go through the webinar is to go ahead and ask the questions when they come to your mind. That's for a couple reasons. One, it'll give us some great questions to dive right into at the end of the webinar. But two, it allows me to take some notes, and I can have an idea of the context of the question, just in case that it's not crystal clear by the time we get to the end exactly what you're asking. I can help Joe with that. Now, the way that you ask the questions, this is going to vary depending on the type of device that you have. If you are on a laptop, a tablet, or a desktop, it's very, very simple. There's a Go to Webinar pane going down the right side of your screen, and near the bottom it says Questions. There's a little triangle next to it. You click that. It opens up, you type in your question, you hit enter, and we've got your question. Now, if you are out on the lot, driving around, wherever you might be, if you are on a smartphone or any other type of mobile device, they all work a little bit differently. You know, there's a lot of manufacturers, a lot of different operating systems. The one thing they have in common is you're either going to have a picture frame that goes around your screen, you're going to have a header or a footer. Somewhere on there, there's going to be a question mark. Touch the question mark, it'll open up for you to type in a question. Now, once you've entered the question, some devices you can just swipe that little box that you type the question into, and it goes away and brings you back to the webinar. Other devices, you'll need to identify another icon somewhere on that picture frame, that header or that footer, that looks like a flat screen desktop monitor. You'll touch that, and it will bring you back to the webinar. Now, for whatever reason, should you get disconnected, maybe you have to jump out for a minute and do something else. No matter what type of device you're using, desktop, laptop, smartphone, whatever, the link that you use to join us this time and the phone number if you're using the phone and the code that you use to type in, they will get you back into the webinar again. So for whatever reason and no matter what device, should you get kicked out of the webinar or you leave for a minute, just use the same link and the same numbers that you used to join us the first time and you can come right back in. Now, with that all being said, I would like to hand the reins over to Joe. Joe, my friend, please take us away.
Thanks, Brian. Before we really dive in, I think it might be a good idea, Brian, if you run back through all of that one more time.
Okay.
Maybe not. Maybe not.
Maybe not. Maybe not. All right.
I'm just jacking with you, Brian. I know everybody's dying to get into the content here. So, thank you, everybody. Again, this is Joe High. I'm with Team Velocity Marketing. And Brian, we are recording this, right? Because I know we have had a lot of people asking for a breakdown of Google's playbook.
Oh yes, absolutely. We are recording this, and if, after you watch this webinar, everybody, if there's somebody else in the dealership that you feel would benefit from it, just let us know, and we'll make sure you get access to it.
Perfect. So we're going to dive in. Obviously, the topic, Google's Dealer Playbook. This playbook has changed a number of times already in its infancy that we see it as today. So this is the latest and greatest version. But what's important to realize here is that it's going to constantly change. So as you would hope it would, it's Google's playbook for digital marketing. If it's not changing constantly, then that means they're getting behind. So I'm going to review kind of what's here, give you our take on it, tell you a couple things to look for and how to implement, what to watch out for, some of the traps that are in there, and really help you translate some of this information into something you can actually work with and use. So we're gonna dive in, and again, as Brian said, I guess we're saving questions till the end, but pepper them in along the way so he can see them, and happy to answer anything at the end of the conversation today. So first and foremost, the playbook is broken down into 4 pillars. This is the playbook, for lack of a better term. There is no physical book. We hosted a great event out at Google a few weeks ago. One of the common questions was, when will the books be printed? There isn't a book. The playbook is essentially these 4 pillars. They get presented differently by different people at Google, but all around the same topics. So the whole general gist of this, and I'm going to repeat this a lot today, you don't go from foundational fundamentals to brilliant basics until you've checked those boxes to the left. And same thing moving forward. So I know there's probably some people on the call today that want to hear about the future growth levers bucket. How do I implement smart bidding and last click attribution changes and connect online to store? I'm going to cover it, but please don't jump straight to there without having the boxes before that generally checked off. So we're going to dive in. We're going to go kind of head to toe on this first bucket, foundational fundamentals. As you can see, the first thing on here, site experience, speed, and excellence. There's a reason this is the far left uppermost checkbox on Google's Dealer Playbook. This is the #1 thing that you have to account for. So speed and excellence we're going to dive into first. 2 tools from Google. Write these down, open them up. You might want to play along at home a little bit for those of you out there on a computer with multiple screens. First is speed. These are both Google tools. Testmysite.syncwithgoogle.com is an online speed test. Now, Google's got a third party they've partnered with that integrates all this in. This is not, googly. This is them working with the best companies out there on web page test speeds and showing you the impact of what happens if you've got a slow site. The second, excellence, that's the other component of what Google talks about in this first checkbox. That can best be looked at in Google's ad previews tool. So google.com/ad preview. There's a number of other ways to get to it, but that's where you can see what's actually happening in the market. Please do your test searches in ad preview. There's a lot of times we're talking to dealers, they call and they say, I'm not showing up for my searches. Well, that's because Google stops serving your ads to you if you stop clicking on them. Obviously, you're not going to click on them because you don't want to cost yourself money, but they recognize that and they stop serving them to you because they don't think it's a relevant ad. So do all your searching in ad preview to make sure you're not negatively impacting your own campaigns. So to dive into these a little bit more. Speed and excellence. So on the speed side of things, this is everything I'm going to show you I pulled up today. So today I went and looked up Longo Toyota on Google's speed test website. I picked them because, to my knowledge, they're the largest Toyota dealer in the country. And 6 seconds, honestly, is better than the industry average. Google's saying the industry average is 9 seconds for a dealer's website right now. I don't want to skew the results here in any way, so you can see Longo Toyota's website, longotoyota.com, comes in at 6 seconds. Google calls that fair. And the most important piece here, 24% estimated visitor loss. That means before they get to look at your inventory or a service coupon or whatever they might have clicked on a paid search ad or even organically, you've already lost a quarter of the traffic. It means you've lost a quarter of your ad spend, a quarter of the people that might fill out the leads, a quarter of the potential sales that you could get from whatever advertising it is you're doing. So it's absolutely critical that you have a platform that's delivering excellent results on this end. You're throwing away 25% of all of your effort if you're not. If you're lucky enough to be at 6 seconds. If you get up to the 9 seconds where the rest of the industry is, you're getting closer to half. Here's exactly what you should expect to see. 3 seconds or less. At 2 seconds, Google calls this excellent. Estimated visitor loss is low. For those of you that are very detail-oriented, you'll see it says loading time on a 3G connection. And the reason for that, and they actually go through this in detail on this site, is because the majority of people are actually served connections on 3G and expect to through 2020. So these are not our data points. And believe me, the website companies are going to have every excuse under the sun for why they're at 9 or 10 seconds. They're going to blame it on your inventory, on your photos, on the chat plugins that you had them put on there. And believe me, when Google launched these things, we were not at 2 seconds with our consumer portals. It takes work to get out there and hammer it to get to this point where you're less than 3 seconds. The other thing, there's a couple of traps. I'm going to kind of tell you about some traps along the way here. It's not terribly difficult to get your home page dialed in down to this 3 seconds, 2 seconds. There's some providers out there that have been able to do that. But make sure you're testing the actual VDPs and the landing pages where your portal or where your campaigns are actually landing. You can have a 3-second home page and kind of trick the process here from a sales perspective, but you're not going to trick anything if the consumers are all bailing before they land on your VDP if that takes 10 seconds. So make sure that your website company hasn't tried to cover their tracks and speed up the home page and have everything else suffer in the background. Go check that out. Check out all the pages you're landing people on. So that's the first one. Testmysite.thinkwithgoogle.com. Plug in your URL. You get a little spinny wheel for a couple seconds, and then it gives you a great report. You can see, you can click on this little Get My Free report and give you all kinds of good information. It even tells you what's slow about your website. So get in there and do that. That's the first part of the first checkbox on this playbook. The second is excellence. And this is a snippet that you can get out of Google Ad Preview, that second tool I told you about. And so again, this morning, did a search for 2017 Ford Focus, and in Ad Preview, I plugged in Las Vegas, Nevada. One of our dealers, Gowden Ford, a great client of ours, is located there, and just did a search for a 2017 Ford Focus. And I'll show you the reason why I searched for a Focus in a second here. But it's important to point out what this excellence means. So the speed and excellence piece of this is delivering an excellent experience to the consumer. That's why the speed is part of that as well. The consumer's not going to wait for a slow site, and they don't want an ad that doesn't speak to what they're searching for. So if you look at a 2017 Ford Focus search phrase here, here's the top two, and I apologize, Friendly Ford. Either I hope you're not on the phone, or if you do, I hope you call us right away, but you're going to get picked on a little bit today here. So the results are clear. Which ad would you click if you were the consumer? The ad here in position number 1, only in 1 because Ford.com did not show up on this search phrase, by the way. And this ad's telling us that the Ford Focus S is $105 a month for 36 months for a lease. You can see it's $218 a month with a 72-month finance option. And it's running 1.9% APR, which is $1,087 off MSRP, and that expires January 2nd next year. In addition to that, we've got 4 key components of the Ford Focus S, the MPG and some of the safety and other details that are the actual highlights that Ford has on their website for that vehicle, along with the location extension, including the hours of operation, and 4 site links to drive you deeper into that site. Or you can choose to click on the one that tells you they have the best prices at Friendly Ford, where you can get a new Focus at Friendly Ford today. They have the hatchback and the sedan, apparently, and there's great deals, and they're friendly like family, and they pay less and get more, and et cetera. And then they do have some site links. Now, I will point out the site links don't appear to be tied in any way to the actual search phrase, because I don't know why I would want to shop commercial inventory if I'm looking for a little Focus. And here's the real funny part about this, because I wanted to click through and experience the landing page, which is another big part of that experience and the excellence. But the funny part is that Friendly's actually selling this vehicle for $220 a month with 0 down. And they're one of the few websites I've seen outside of our consumer portals that are displaying payments, which is great. We highly recommend it. Their payment's only $2 a month more for a finance term here on 72 months. But the kicker is they have 0 down. And I know Gowden's not running 0 down. If they were, it would actually show up in our search ad. They dynamically insert the details of the deal into the search ad. So unless Gowden's down payment is less than $150, Friendly actually has the cheaper car in the market. But I don't think there's a chance that the consumer is going to click on Friendly's ad when they can see all the detail to potentially buy the car in Gowden's ad. So critical component of excellence here is having that relevant ad copy, driving what the consumer is looking for. Don't put, a $35,000 price point in the search ad. The consumer has no idea what that means to their wallet on a monthly basis. Some small fraction of the dealers that are out there, your percentage of consumers that pay cash for your deals versus lease or finance. It's not enough to have it be worth skipping a payment in your search ad. So you need to be serving these ads for every model you sell, and they need to be updated with your incentives and your pricing details on a nightly basis as they change, either, in this case through Ford or at your store. The last piece of this speed and excellence bucket and that consumer experience is where you land them. Obviously, this is going a little overboard, but if you click and you don't get what you're expecting, that's not going to help the consumer either. So make sure you're landing on a site that has the exact same information that had them interested in the ad itself and clicking through that ad, whether it be the payment or the APR and the savings off the MSRP, all the details about the vehicle, the stuff that they found relevant enough to click on. Make sure you don't reset them again and land them on a page that doesn't have any of it. So that's the critical component there. So that's box number one, and I'm not going to hammer through every individual box quite that much detail, but want to give you a little sense. That's kind of the effort here, is going through what each of these boxes really means and what you can do to test and implement. So the next step, foundational fundamentals, Google measurement. This one's pretty straightforward. You have to inspect what you expect. Traffic minimum calls, form submissions, VDP pages with AWCT, that's AdWords, or linked Google Analytics goals. So Google's obviously, throughout the Google Playbook, going to tell you to use Google tools. You're not going to have them pitching Facebook in here, for example. You'll see in a few minutes. But there's other tools out there. Brian Pash has tools. We have tools. Everybody else in the industry has some form of tool. But make sure you're at least linked to your analytics account and have the ability to see this detail. Phone calls, form submissions, VDP pages. We would tell you to take it even further. In our Apollo platform, we'd show you the opportunities as well. So consumers are not only shopping if they fill out a form or call. In fact, most consumers, as you can see on the screenshot here, there's only 11 form submissions, but there's 712 people engaging in this dealer's portal at the same time. So if you think your opportunities are limited to phone calls and form submissions, which happen to equal 100 here, you're missing out in this case on about 85% of the opportunities. So make sure you have a way of seeing that data. I'm not going to tell you it has to be Google's or ours, but you've got to be able to see all the details around what your campaigns are doing. You also should be able to see some basics on click-through rate, CPC, impression share, et cetera, that you'd find in our digital reporting platform, and I would hope in every reporting platform you might be working with. So that was the quick hitter. The next one we're going to dive into, paid search basics. This is where the rubber really meets the road. Again, do not go to the bucket in blue until you check these bottom two boxes over here on the red section. Paid search basics. So we're going to go through ad excellence and keyword coverage and tell you what this really means. In fact, it needs a little explanation because even Google didn't use their Google spell check here. 3+ highly ads. They're trying to tell you 3+ highly relevant ads per ad group with 3 extensions set to optimize rotation. And then we also had keyword coverage, 90% coverage on branded, ready-to-buy keywords. And we're going to talk about that a little bit. So what does ad excellence, 3+ highly relevant ads per ad group with extensions and optimized rotation really mean? Well, here's an example. So we've got a sample search ad that we would write for a dealer, and breaking this down for you. So we already saw the core components of the ad. You have headline 1, which is everything up to the little dash. Headline 2, which is everything following the dash. You've got 40 characters, and then 80 down here in the description that you can work with if you're working with expanded text ads. If you're working with a company that's not writing expanded text ads and taking advantage of all 80 characters, just hang up right now, write down my information, and call us later because you've got to get out of whatever you're working on right now. That is an absolute basic. It's not even on Google's checklist because it's so basic. You've got to be using expanded text ads. So this section, though, is all about ad extensions. So you've got a couple different extensions in here. You have structured snippets, call-out extensions, price extensions, site link extensions, location extensions, and phone extensions. So When Google talks about 3+ extensions or ad extensions in each ad, this is the stuff they're talking about. They want to see you highlighting things like the trims that are available. Now, in this case, Google limits you to what you can say. They have models as a choice. We display the trims for the vehicle that you're searching for, in our case. Then you have the call-outs, which is pointing out the main features of that particular vehicle. In this case, you also have the site links, driving you to relevant links for the search you perform. So, for example, you don't see a search here for commercial vehicles on a Civic search. And then the location extension would show you, obviously, the address for that particular store. Now, price extensions are somewhat new. They've been around for probably 2 years, but they're now available on both mobile and desktop, and you can really take advantage of things. So there's a couple of things that we've started building here at Team Velocity to take advantage of these extensions. The one example you see here is what we call upgrade matrix. Somebody who's in the market for a Civic would also see pricing information on the 3 vehicles that are most likely to purchase based on being interested in a Civic, based on that particular dealer's upgrade matrix, and which is really driven off their trade pattern. The rotation component of this block on Google's playbook has to do with ad variations and extension variations. So Google plays with the rotation of these extensions, and even within an extension, such as price extensions, showing different extensions. So the reason they're doing that, and I apologize for saying extension so much here, but I'm trying to use all the terms. They're trying to see what catches the eye of the consumer. So on a search for, a 17 Honda Civic in this case, they might find that when they serve up the different trim levels, that people are more likely to click on the ad than they are when they serve up the call-out extension showing the 5 core components, or in this case 4 core components of the Honda Civic. If that's the case, they're going to start serving those trims more often than they serve the features of the vehicle. Same thing goes with something like price extensions. They'll actually do those rotations within the actual extension themselves. So in the scenario you see here, we have our upgrade matrix kind of version of a price extension, but the other extensions we'll be able to show will be different terms, so 24-month, 36-month, 72-month terms, and the price point for those, as well as the price on different trims. So for example, the EXL, the LX, the Touring, being able to show the different price points on those. All 3 of those are price extensions, but the 3 variations of price extensions, and again, Google would auto-rotate those, doing a little bit of an A/B test to find out which performs best on certain search phrases in certain markets, etc., and accordingly serve up whichever is going to work best. The end result of all that, the reason that Google wants you to do this, they want to serve the best results to the consumer that keeps them coming back to Google for their searches all the time, and they reward you for that. So you start seeing higher click-through rates, obviously, because Google's doing that smart testing for you, but you also see a little bit of benefit on the CPC side of things when you have those ad variations as well. So a couple critical components there to factor in, and really to understand what Google's actually telling you when they talk about ad rotation, variation, and extensions. Excuse me. So the next one, keyword coverage. So Google said 90% coverage on branded ready-to-buy keywords, according to Google. So what does this mean? 90% coverage means 90% impression share. 90% impression share means 10% lost impression share, meaning if there's been 10 searches, 90% means you've shown up 9 out of 10 times, and the 10% lost impression share means there was 1 time you did not show up. The way Google actually displays all this information in AdWords is as a lost impression share metric where it's relevant to making a change. Lost impression share gets a little technical. It's not as straightforward as I didn't show up 1 time out of 10 like I made it sound like it was. There's 2 different reasons you can not show up. You can not show up because of rank, it's called lost impression share due to rank, or because of budget, meaning you just simply didn't have enough money. Lost impression share due to rank is not something you should really have to worry about if you're working with anybody reputable. As long as you're floating around that position 2.0 average, then you're in a good spot from a rank perspective. You don't need to overspend to try to outspend Ford to get to position 1. That's not what the role for the dealer is. However, loss due to budget just simply means you don't have enough money to respond to that. So the way I like to look at impression share is as if it's a phone call. Each search is a phone call. So if you had a consumer call and say, back in our example we saw earlier, I'm interested in, and then the search phrase, 2017 Ford Focus. How would you want to respond? So if you don't have an ad showing up, lost impression share, it's the equivalent of not answering the phone. So you would lay into your staff if they didn't answer the phone. If somebody called, just imagine if you knew somebody was calling with interest in a Ford Focus 2017, and you had somebody just didn't pick up the phone. That's what not covering that search phrase is like on Google. Somebody is telling you they are interested in a 2017 Ford Focus, and you're saying, thanks, but no thanks. It's not worth the additional $3 for me to potentially get that click. And that's essentially what this lost impression share due to budget really means. So Google's telling you 90% impression share. And the way to look at that is to go find your lost impression share due to budget, get that sucker maxed out, and you'll find yourself floating around 90% total impression share if you've got a good average position as well. Ready to buy keywords, that's the second half of Google's phrase here. So 90% coverage on branded, ready to buy keywords. So you're not buying Honda Civic. You're not buying Honda. You're not buying best minivan. These keywords are not branded, ready to buy keywords. These are keywords that should be reserved for tier 1, tier 2, and if you look in Google's playbook, they get a little bit aggressive in my opinion and suggest if you still have money left over, feel free to come spend this. They will always take your money. I love Google, but they will always have a way for you to spend it. Do not start. This is the bucket on the far left. Do not buy Honda Civic. Go check your AdWords campaigns. Look to see if you're buying it. That has no intent to purchase in that search phrase. 2018 Honda Civic does. Honda Accord price does. Honda dealer near me, they're telling you, I want a price. Here's the model I'm specifically interested in this particular year. I want to find the dealer that's near me because I'm planning on coming there. Those are the things that show that ready-to-buy intent that you need to be doing. Now, be careful. You got this cat out here. I'm not sure which company he works for, but you got to be careful. There are ways to manipulate this 90% coverage on branded ready-to-buy keywords phrase. Let's go into that a little bit. So this is a trick question. You already know this because I'm asking which one's better, and it's obvious. So you would think 90% impression share, 250 CPC, which is lower, 19% click-through rate, which is higher than the one over on the right, 60%, 310 and 14. Obviously, the one on the left is better, right? No, I wouldn't ask if it was that obvious. The one on the right is better. Here's why. This one on the left is just buying branded keywords for your dealership name and maybe the top 3 vehicles. Just chilling in the pool, enjoying a beverage. Beverages are going to come into this a lot later, so get used to that. Not what you're looking for. This is not doing you any good. You can get real low CPCs. In fact, I tell you, if you're getting a 250 CPC from a vendor who's just buying your dealership name, you're getting hosed there. However, on the right-hand side, you're swimming in the deep end of the pool. There's some sharks in this end of the pool. It gets a lot more competitive. You're buying brand. You're buying geo terms. You're buying every make and model that you sell. You're buying used inventory terms for vehicles that aren't even the brand on the front of the store. Things get more complicated here. Your CPCs go up. Your click-through rates go down because there's a lot more competition. Your impression share is going to go down because there's a lot more keywords you're buying. So impression share can be manipulated. Remember, all it means is for the number of searches that happen, how many times did you show up? And that only applies to the keywords you're buying. So if you're buying 100 keywords, it's a lot easier to have 90% impression share than it is if you're buying 5,000 keywords. So be careful with people manipulating this. You got to have a sense for the keywords that are being bought. Make sure you're swimming in the deep end of the pool where you can get somebody who's searching for a 2017 Honda Civic lease. That's much more relevant than somebody that's just searching for Honda. So very important. Just keep your eyes peeled. Get into the weeds on that. Make sure you know what kind of terms that they're buying. Next. So we've covered the foundational fundamentals. Again, please cover those boxes before you try to do anything in the next buckets. All right, otherwise you're just going to waste your money. Brilliant basics. So let's start with brilliant basics. Paid search excellence. So what this is telling us, structure for intent, improve business decision-making, and QS, that's quality score, by tightening ad group and campaign strategies. I'm guessing half of you out there have no idea what that means, and that's okay. That's why we're on the call. So improving and tightening ad group and campaign strategies. So there is a structure that you should be following with your campaigns. You do not want searches for, I'll stick with Honda, a new Honda Civic or 2018 Honda Civic to be in the same campaign structure within AdWords as a used 2014 Ford F-150. They're different campaigns. They're going to perform differently. One campaign will drag down the performance of another campaign if you have them in the same bucket. You have to have everything separated by ad group, campaign, et cetera, effectively. I'm not going to get into the details of that, but things like your brand, your geo brand, your vehicle inventory, Spanish campaigns, they all need to be in their own buckets to not kind of taint the ability to look at what's performing as well as impact the actual performance itself. Another important part, though, of this structure is the targeting, and that's part of your campaign strategy. So here's a great example of what too many vendors do. They put a big radius on it and say, oh, well, you know, we target 20 miles around your dealership. Well, you know, if you're Cardinal Honda and you've got a radius-based targeting strategy, then you're targeting like the eastern tip of Long Island, which is probably a 5-hour drive. I have no idea. Maybe it's a shorter boat ride, but that's not going to fly. You have to have a company that understands your market. If they don't have your DMS data, how on earth do they have any clue where you actually perform? In fact, I'm going to hop out into our Apollo platform and show you some real examples of this. I made this one up just because it's a powerful example of being ridiculous. But let me show you. And Brian, can you confirm that you can see a green map on my screen right now?
Yes, I can see the green map with the circle on it.
Perfect. Thank you, buddy. So
yep.
I have God and Ford, just to maintain that same example we had before up right now. And God's a great example, as I said earlier here. They're in Las Vegas. You can see where we're actually targeting across all mediums for them has a very clear line of distinction here on where we are and where we're not. So we're targeting in the green for them. We're not targeting over here in the gray. If I turn on the ability to look at these zip codes here, you're going to see why real quick. So we can target a zip code. I'm just going to pick this guy here. And you can see, I'm not going to get into the detail of what all this is telling us, but in this one zip code, there's a $333 cost per sale forgotten. They've sold 114 vehicles in this zip code in the last 12 months. There's 3,100, in this case, Fords in this particular zip code, and it's 5.9 miles from the dealership. So nice, nearby, friendly zip. It's their 9th best sales zip. That's a great zip for them. I can go right over here. Not far at all. I'm now 9.8 miles away from the dealership. All of a sudden, that cost per sale jumped to $1,430.77. So 1.8 to 1 ROI. And again, I'm not going to get into the math on that, but trust me that the math works there. They've only sold 13 vehicles in that zip code out of the 1,550 Fords that are there. This is not a zip code they should be targeting. Now, I don't know, the details of Vegas, and if there's just some like bad guy row across here that threatens to steal your hubcaps every time you drive across that street or something. But don't try to mess with consumer behavior. You're not going to outmarket consumer behavior here. Run with what the data says. So again, if you don't have the dealership's data, how on earth do you have any clue where you should be marketing? How do you know that you should be marketing out here further? Look at this. I mean, you've only sold one car out here. There's only 4 Fords. It's not that painful to capture that Ford search when it happens. You should certainly get that one sale out of 4 before you try to go get the 13 out of 2,000 or whatever that number is. So just a quick hitter there to show you a little bit of that targeting component. Oops, I'm already in there. Click. All right, so back in the PowerPoint. So that targeting is a component of structure for intent in addition to the actual campaign structure. The next section here, or the next couple sections, I'm going to summarize into a little bit better flow. Now, Google's never going to do this because I'm going to show you, where I recommend buying Facebook, and they call that the F word, literally. It's pretty funny when you do. And so maximizing ready to buy, we kind of covered that pretty well. That's saying don't be floating over here in this blue bucket or getting to the green or the yellow unless you're really already maximizing all those searches. Like I said, unless you're answering the phone every time somebody calls, don't go trying to swim in these other lanes. It's not gonna go over well for you. So I'm gonna go through TrueView and Google Display, new car expansion, used car coverage. Some of you might have noticed that I skipped over that targeted brand fixed ops over in the red bucket. Creative testing, targeting. I'm going to go through basically the whole green section as well as the bottom part of the blue here on my next slide. Because what I really think is important for dealers to understand is where they should spend money first and then how they should flow that. So hopefully everybody's sitting there hitting the print screen button a bunch of times so they can paste this into a Word document and go ask their digital marketing manager later if they're doing this. But this is my recommendation. You see right out of the gate, matching exactly what Google said, 85 to 90% impression share. This would be on your branded keywords, low funnel, ready to buy keywords. The next couple of boxes here, disc and Spanish. So disc is what we call our dynamic inventory or our used car campaigns. And then Spanish is pretty straightforward. This to me, and I would throw service in the mix here too, getting detailed into service offers should be in here as well. This is a matter of the dealership's appetite. So Google's trying to create this digital playbook that works for everybody. Obviously, some dealers are sitting there saying, I'm not running service ads. I don't have a single bay open at any point during the day. I'm not spending more money to have people wait in line longer and get upset with me and put bad reviews online. So you can't make that recommendation broadly to everybody. Same thing on used cars or Spanish. If you're sitting in the middle of the country and there's not a lot of Spanish-speaking population there, probably shouldn't be running Spanish campaigns. So there's a component of, does this apply to the dealership, that you need to ask yourself first. So if it does, I recommend getting into your used car inventory, deeper into service coupons, getting into Spanish, which actually, by the way, performs very well if you're running it right. High click-through rates, low CPCs. There's not a lot of people playing in that space, but it's also low volume. Even in heavily Spanish markets, you're going to find there's still low search volume compared to English there, but still a good, effective spend. The next thing to move into is remarketing. Now, there's a lot of buzzwords that get thrown around, remarketing, retargeting. There's a whole bunch of different ways to say this. The bottom line is it's all the same thing. People who have been to your site before, or your consumer portal in our case, you want to retarget them with a message. I recommend doing it in pre-roll first if you have the video assets. It's the most effective medium. In fact, a little tidbit we picked up at Google a couple weeks ago at our conference we hosted there, searches in YouTube have surpassed searches in Google for automotive keywords. So let that sink in a little bit. As big as Google is for automotive searches, and think about what you're spending today, it's bigger on YouTube. There are more searches happening there. So you need to get a pre-roll strategy. You need to get a video strategy. You need to be buying search terms in YouTube. You need to get dialed in on video. It's happening. It's already happened. It's already surpassed what a lot of you think has happened. So pre-roll is where I would start. Get the assets built, get those in there effectively. I would then move to Facebook. Facebook has a big audience. One thing to be aware of on the Facebook side, especially as it relates to video, what they count as an impression or as something that's been seen is using the IAB standards, which is like 50% of the ad for 1 second or more. I mean, I can blink for longer than that. So be careful trying to compare YouTube video metrics to Facebook video metrics. They're very different environments. One's intended for video. The other is obviously a social tool. But Facebook is a great advertising medium there. And then after that, I would move into display. So display meaning your banner advertising. Now, when you do display, by the way, especially on the retargeting side, make sure you're serving something relevant. If a consumer clicked on that ad for the focus and landed on a page for the focus and shopped and built focus, please serve them a display banner for the focus. Don't serve it for the F-150 because it's the most popular vehicle you sell. They don't want an F-150. They want a focus. Give them a focus. So that's retargeting, remarketing, etc. 90 to 95% of dealers' budgets are gone at this point. If you're playing in Instagram and Pandora and in-market audiences and everybody's telling you today on how great Oracle's data is, which, by the way, it is great. But if you haven't checked these other boxes off first, please do not try to play in the other spaces. Don't go and try to get Facebook custom audiences knocked out or in-market pre-roll because the person's been shopping for this or that. Your whole intent here, and this is critical to understand, Facebook, YouTube, display, these are branding campaigns. The whole intent of these campaigns and where they really drive value is they drive additional searches. So let's think about this. Let's say you spend $1,000 on pre-roll on YouTube TrueView platform. Great platform. Not all it's going to do, but the main thing it's going to do is drive more search intent. If you're not putting more money back into search when you add money to pre-roll, then all you're doing is driving more people to search for the product that your competitors will serve an ad for because you're out of money. So if you're sitting there at 75% impression share for that Ford Focus search, and you run a pre-roll ad, or you run a display campaign or a Facebook ad that's designed to drive people to search for that product, and the consumer comes back and says, man, I see this Ford Focus everywhere. I'm ready to buy one. And they do a search for it. And your ad doesn't show up because you don't have enough budget, then you've just wasted $1,000. In fact, you spent $1,000 to advertise that vehicle to the consumer, and they're going to click an ad. It's just not going to be yours because yours isn't showing up. That's why I keep on harping on the fact that you do not move to the buckets on the right unless you check those boxes on the left. Google put them in this order for a reason. Cover that 90% keyword coverage, optimizing impression share for ready-to-buy keywords. So absolutely critical. So I'm going to be a little different than Google's recommendation on one of these buckets. And if anybody wants to get in the weeds on it, feel free to call me later. RLSA and similar audience. So similar audience is becoming a lot better. They're starting to have it actually be relevant to the recent search phrases that consumers are doing. There's too many data points out there in the industry, and I won't name names of the companies providing them, that are just based on the age of the vehicle the consumer owns. Having a 2014 vehicle does not make you in market to buy another vehicle. Similar audience is starting to actually utilize data that says this is what people are shopping for. RLSA stands for retargeting lists for search audiences. I have a little bit of a beef with this one with Google. What it's implying is if you use RLSA, you're targeting an audience that's been to your website before, and you should apply bid adjustments, etc., to the search phrase they're searching for. Meaning, if you search for that Ford Focus, and you go and you poke around on the website, you come back later on, and you search for that Ford Focus again, what RLSA's kind of intent here in this case would be to say, well, this person's definitely in market, they've been to your site, they're searching again, let's spend a little bit more money to make sure we show up at the top of the page. I'm not bought in on that for that particular use. And some of the data that comes behind that to support it would say, oh, well, if you look at the campaigns and you compare people who have been to your site before and people who haven't, their click-through rates are higher and they convert better. Well, of course, your returning customers have a tendency to do more business with you than customers that have never been to you before. That's a loaded stat. However, where RLSA is relevant, and this is a great place to use it, again, make sure you're covering the left before you get to this section. But if you were going to take a service term like oil change, you would never buy it. It is not a branded, ready-to-buy keyword. Toyota oil change is very different. If you're a Toyota dealer, you want to buy Toyota oil change. It means that the consumer's got a Toyota, they're looking for an oil change. You know a lot more about them. RLSA can become relevant. The consumer that's been to your site, maybe they're on a page that says, owner benefits, or they logged into a private consumer portal, and you know who they are, and you know that they drive a Toyota. Then searching for a keyword like oil change is very different, right? It means that you know that person has a Toyota. Now they're searching for oil change. It's no different than them searching for Toyota oil change. So that's a scenario where RLSA does make sense in my book. I will check that box for Google there. But when you get into that level of detail on your keywords and your targeting, in my mind, RLSA belongs a little further to the right on Google's playbook. But in that case, it does make sense. So that's that box that I kind of skipped over in that previously. We covered new car expansion, used car coverage, where that really belongs, buying those keywords. I'm going to show you an example later of where used car coverage really does work, even if you can't find the conversions. Anybody on the Team Velocity team that might be on the call, make sure you're paying attention to that part as well. We've got some great new data to share there. And then video and display for growth. So we talked about that. These 6-second ads that Google's recently added to the deck here for their playbook, they're talking about what they call bumper ads. Those are little quick, short 6-second spots that you can plop after a video. They perform well as well. Just a quick hitter, and you can kind of loop those through and create a story over time with a number of 6-second ads that create some good lift. Again, you're in today's differentiators there, so make sure you understand that. You got to be checking those boxes to the left first. I told you I was going to beat that point up. All right, so now future growth levers. I'm afraid this is probably what half of the people are on the call for, is to understand the deepest part of the funnel here. But there is some cool stuff here. So we'll start out with Google's machine learning put to work. And so again, Google's obviously going to present Google's version of these tools. And so they have a smart bidding option built into AdWords and some other tools available as well. There are other tools out there. What you need to know is how to tell what's being done. So I'm going to guess that 85% of you on the call that are dealers will come away from this slide bitter about your digital agency, which honestly is a little bit of my intent for showing it. So if you're in AdWords, this is the new view for AdWords. Click on search campaigns, or if you're in the old view, you can kind of do this by adding columns, but if you're in the old view, somewhere up in this region, you probably have a button that says, click here to try the new view for Google AdWords. If you do that, it'll look just like this. You'll see the search campaign section here. Make sure you're in search. Scroll down here. You'll see change history at the bottom of the list. And what this is doing is just showing you what changes are being made on your behalf by your agency in your search campaigns. If you keep it high level like this, all campaigns for your particular dealer, this is going forward. I pulled this today, but this is for the month of October. You can see we made 34,700 changes in the month of October. 10,000 of them were ad changes. That's because we're updating pricing and in stock every night across Google and Bing. 19,400 of them were bid changes. And this is where this checkbox on Google's playbook comes into play. This bid and budget management kind of component and smart bidding in Google's platform. So whether it's Google's platform or a number of other platforms that are out there, somebody needs to be looking at this. This is how you maximize your dollars in Google. This is how you minimize your CPC. It's like looking at an old school eBay auction. You get out of the auction when it gets expensive, you come back in when it's low. If you're a dealership that's sitting out there and you realize that your budget's gone by 4 o'clock in the afternoon, it's because your agency is not doing any of this. It means they're just buying every keyword as soon as it becomes available in an effort to spend your money, and they're pacing your dollars probably even across the month, simply taking your budget, dividing it by 30, and calling that, bid and budget management. That is not what this is. These systems, the system we take advantage of, looks at your ads every 30 minutes and says, what's happening in the auction for this exact keyword? What should I do? It's making little 1 and 2 cent incremental changes to minimize that CPC, to still get the right average position, to get those clicks, and maximize the number of clicks you can get for your dollar. You're going to find an alarmingly low number in here if you go into AdWords and do this. You're going to find this number in like the teens. Not the teens of thousands, the teens. That just tells you that vendor has gone to set it and forget it mode. Whatever fee you're paying him is I'm not even going to take a shot, is not being spent on you, put it that way. So this is a very important part. Get into AdWords. Find out if anybody is taking your campaign and managing it. You can't do this manually. If you try to do this manually, you will never compete with us doing it programmatically. But you're welcome to try. The next bucket. Now, we're going to get into some cool stuff. Like I said, this is the future growth levers bucket. There's some cool new stuff here. I saw some great slides from Google. In fairness, we stole them and recreated them, but we told them we were going to, so they were all right with it. And I'm going to show you some cool stuff here. So Again, this is playing in the space that you shouldn't be playing in unless you're ready for it. But before I get there, maximizing measurement, beyond last click attribution. So I'll go through last click attribution, what that means. It's a very popular topic these days. Connecting online to store. So how can you tell what's going on? People are searching and you can't tie it back to what's actually happening in your store or to a sale. In reality, you can. And I'm going to go through some of the cool tools that Google has out there now and what you can look at. So, great slide from Google. Shows you the old school attribution models, last click, hands down the most popular. That just means, hey, wherever they clicked from, it's showing as my referring URL. Hooray, they get credit, or that campaign or that source or that site or whatever it is gets credit for whatever conversion I got, and I blindly can't see anything else. First click takes that mindset of, well, if they never would have clicked on me the first time, then everything else they did after that would be irrelevant. That's very rarely used and just a poor effort. There's a couple of new options, and these are all inside of Google AdWords. You can go in and you can adjust your settings to try any number of these other attribution models. And so all you have to do is go in, you hit the drop down, you pick from any of these others, and you can kind of get a little bit of a gist of what these are saying. Time decay means it gives a little bit of credit to the stuff that happened early, but gives more credit to the most recent thing. Linear just averages it across the board and says everybody gets equal credit. Position-based, that's probably the worst one in my mind. And then, to me, the best option here, data-driven. And to understand that, because you clearly can't fully tell from the bar graph here, we go to an example that most of you are probably very familiar with. So hopefully this is not a weekly occurrence for you all, but for those of you that ended up passed out, face down on the floor, maybe a tooth missing, glasses all busted, rooster in the background pecking on your head, and a tiger in the bathroom, for any of you that get the movie reference here, you're trying to figure out how this happened. And this is the best way I've seen attribution explained, and data-driven attribution in particular, in the market. So Google gets full credit for this. We just made the slide bigger and funnier. So you started the night out with a nice little glass of champagne, feeling good about yourself, ready to have a good night. Then you kicked it up a notch. Maybe you got a little double IPA, maybe a little Mad Elf since it's holiday season. Delicious, but it's 12%. That's going to do a little damage later on. Then you move to a little glass of red wine, feeling good about that. Maybe a double martini. Now we got some whiskey coming into play. Things are getting real now. And then we polish off the night with a little refresher, maybe a little Mick Ultra. Now, if we think back to our attribution models, last click, which was what most of you are looking at, is telling us that the Mick Ultra is what drove us to laying on the ground, toothless, with a rooster pecking at our head. That's never happened to anybody, no matter how much you like Mick Ultra. It just can't happen. What data-driven attribution is doing is it's saying, let's look at these scenarios. Let's look at all the people that ended up laying on the ground like this the next morning and determine what's most commonly the cause of this end resolution. So if we think of this as a lead, if you want to look at it that way, or even better, as a sale, what drove us to the sale similarly more often than not. So in short here, Google takes 1,000 of these scenarios and says, 1,000 times we ended up with somebody face down like this. If we look at those 1,000 times, how often did the Mick Ultra come into play? Or how often in search terms did a display campaign get shown? Well, you know what? That display campaign or that Mick Ultra, when it was not involved, we still ended up very heavily with people face down on the floor or with the sale happening. But if you take that shot of whiskey out, or if you take out that Google search term that somebody clicked on, or that form submission, or whatever the case may be, this is not trying to pitch one medium over another. But if you take that shot of whiskey out of the equation, those couple shots that happen, now all of a sudden there's less correlation. It's less likely that the person ends up face down, on the floor here. So data-driven is using the data that it sees in your system or in AdWords for your account to say, more oftentimes than not, when this is in the mix, we see that conversion happen. And so that's a great way to look at this. It's a great way. Get in there and play around with data-driven attribution as a setting in AdWords. If I click down real quick here, we played around with this for Paragon Honda, one of our great partner clients. And this is what we found. The brand campaigns, meaning the word Paragon Honda, is getting too much credit. This is the Michelob Ultra of campaigns. But the service campaigns, the new vehicle sales, the pre-owned campaigns, they're not getting enough credit. These are really the whiskey. This is really what put you on your butt. But it's not getting enough credit when it comes to conversion attribution. In fact, on the pre-owned side of things, running our disc campaigns, we saw a 23% lift in conversions when moving to a data-driven attribution model. Now, to put this back and get out of the bar for a little bit here, it becomes a little bit easier to understand if you kind of think through what that process might look like. So let's take that pre-owned search for Paragon, for example. Somebody searches for a 2013 Ford F-150. They get a beautiful ad that says how many in stock, the price point, the number of miles that are on this vehicle. It happens to be a Paragon Honda. They take in a lot of trades. Some of them are Ford F-150s. You click the link, you find out that Paragon's got a great deal. You learn everything about the vehicle. You look at all the photos, and you say, boy, this looks like a good deal. You leave the site, you go poke around your auto traders, your cars, whatever else you want to do, your local Ford stores. And at the end of the day, you say, you know what, I think the one that's over at Paragon is right for me. So what do? Do you go back in, you type 2013 Ford F-150 again? No. You remember that you saw it at Paragon Honda, you type Paragon Honda, and all of a sudden, the brand, the Michelob Ultra, that got full credit for everything that happened in this last click attribution world. In reality, there's no chance that consumer is coming to Paragon Honda to buy a used Ford unless you were running that pre-owned campaign. So you got to look at this. You will not see high conversion rates on used car campaigns, but they are working. They are there. This is a great way to start seeing some of that data. So this is in AdWords. You can do this today. You can play in the future growth leverage bucket on your own in AdWords by changing those settings, and it really shows you not that things aren't working. This is not telling you that brand's not working. Remember, you need to have that brand search show up when they come back looking for you again. It's just telling you what things are working more than you might be giving them credit for. So this is a great tool that's in Google, in AdWords, that you can play around with to play in that space. The next one here, store visits. So again, we just kind of ran with Paragon here as an example. Paragon happens to have a sales location and a service location. Their Google My Business account is tied to their sales location. And they happen to have enough volume to qualify for this great Google tool or Google data set called store visits, where Google's actually measuring the people that come to their site. We were able, with Google and store visits, which shows up under the conversion section in AdWords, to find 829 attributable sales location visits in September. What does that mean? 829 store visits, Google said, happened in September at Paragon Honda's sales location. Paragon has a 36% closing rate of people who visit the lot on the first pass, not including the people they follow back up with, but 36% closing rate there. That's 240 vehicles they can associate as likely being sold on the 829 visitors that came through a Google campaign. At an average gross of $3,000 a copy, that's $720,000 in gross profit on campaigns that can be on visitors that can be tied back to a Google campaign. On a $38,000 budget on Google, the bottom line, that's $681,000 in gross profit, including your search budget, an 18-to-1 ROI on that spend, and $46 per visit. Now, that's not trying to give Google 100% credit for this or trying to claim every sale or anything like that. That's just simply saying 829 people who did a search showed up at the store later at minimum, just the ones that were able to be tracked. And using Paragon in this case is just average numbers. And say you wanted to cut it in half and say they only closed 18%. Great, it's a 9-to-1 ROI. It's only $340,000 in gross profit on $38,000 in spend. You can do the math. This stuff works. There's people out there telling you it doesn't work. It works. So again, that's store visits. You have to qualify. There are ways to set up your campaigns to make you more likely to qualify. But if you're a small volume dealer, you're not going to qualify for this quite yet. There are some cool tools coming out. We can't talk about them yet. Google is sending some stuff our way that we will be able to deploy to some of your stores that don't qualify, that will allow you to qualify. I'm not even going to talk about it right now because I know my sales team is going to ask me for them as soon as they arrive, and I got to keep that on the down low for right now. The next cool thing that Google's got, you can upload your transactions. And again, you can do this. Even though this is in the far right future growth levers section, you can upload your transactions into Google. The easier way to do this is to work with your agency and tell them to do it. But this can be done on your own if you need to. What this process looks like, the consumer searches for 2017 Honda Civic price, for example. You can track what they call the G-CLID. That's Google's Click ID. Take all of your G-CLIDs, load them all up into Google, along with any phone calls that came through a Google tracking phone number. Push all that stuff back up into Google, along with your sales and service transactions that you can tie out. And all that does, all Google's doing there is saying, I'm going to connect the two dots here. I'm going to take these G-CLIDs and the consumers, I'm going to tie them back out to the transactions you uploaded, and I'm going to show you where your money came, or where your money really came from a campaign perspective. Now, you can upload gross profit, you can upload revenue, you can upload some custom calculation that says, here's my gross profit on my sales, here's my gross profit on the additional trades that came in off previous sales, here's my service RO profit. You can load whatever you want to come up with this ROI attribution that you want. In this case, again, we did this for Paragon. 423 transactions were able to be matched back to a call it $1 million in revenue across sales and service. And what's cool about this is what you can then see in Google is the breakdown of the campaigns that drove this revenue. So in Paragon's case, 52% of it came from brand, 15% from the geo campaigns, 10% from pre-owned. You see the service, sales, etc. But one thing to keep in mind here, Google's actually doing this with last click attribution in mind. This is showing you the campaign they clicked from. That G-CLID is the last click. You have to go back to our passed out on the floor scenario here and keep in mind that things like new sales and pre-owned and service deserve a lot more credit for this revenue than they were originally being given. So those are some pretty cool tools that Google has available. Smart bidding, the click attribution that you can pick from different models, store visits provided by Google, uploading transactions, some really powerful stuff that falls into this future growth levers section of the playbook. I've been talking for a full hour, and I thought Brian was going to kill me hearing him talk about the app and how you all chime in. I can only imagine how you feel about me talking straight for an hour. So thank you for the time. Happy to answer any questions, anything that you all have. Hit me with it.
That was a very informative presentation, Joe. Thank you very much. Everybody who's on the call right now, please type in your questions. And actually, Amy, I see your question on there. I'm not really sure how to ask that to Joe, so I'm going to go ahead and just have him respond to you after the webinar. Let's see. Yeah, and Amy, I will have him get with that. Carrie says, speed test, is this testing mobile sites only, and is there a different tolerance for desktop versus mobile in terms of an industry standard?
Great question. So this particular site that Google has is testing the mobile speed test using a 3G connection, et cetera, et cetera. If you go, I believe it's actually webpagetest.org. I'm going to do the ever so dangerous thing and try to go live here and see if this is actually accurate. So as I mentioned earlier, Google just has an API hitting some of these sites, and I think this might be the one. You can establish kind of what you want to test, the browsers, the URL, and you can pick a couple different things. So if you play around in here, it gives you some very cool data on what's slowing things down. And I believe, to answer your question, you can pick desktop versus mobile, even the speed of the connection that you want to test, and you can see a lot of those data points as well. But keep in mind, in fact, it's interesting. Gowden, the dealer I was using, it kind of surprised me, but they're at 90% mobile. That's a huge number. I mean, honestly, at 90% mobile, it makes desktop irrelevant. So while you need to be aware of desktop, make sure you're aware that the reason Google's testing it on mobile, that's where the bulk of the consumers are consuming it, is absolutely past 50% now. Good question.
All right.
What else you got, Brian?
Oh, I've got a bunch here. Actually, Amy says that her website provider is telling her that Pingdom is better, but it's a better way to test the site. Is that correct?
So Pingdom is another very valid choice. You know, feel free to use anything. Google's just trying to give you an easy way to do it, but Pingdom is also a good tool to use. I found that the one that Google's using now they had an old version, less detailed, more open for issues. The version that they're using now, and you've seen a refresh of their site, it came with a new backend. I like the one they have now. It gives you a nice little actual like waterfall diagram. I believe that's that web page tech. A waterfall diagram of what's taking a long time to open, and it actually shows you how to fix the issues that are out there. It's a very technical site. Pingdom's a little bit less technical, but has good data. Nothing against Pingdom.
All right. Another question from Carrie: how do we qualify, or how do you qualify for Google store visits?
That's purely based on traffic. So reach out to your agency, ask them if you qualify, ask them what they've done to optimize your site, or not your site, but your campaigns to potentially qualify. You know, I want to say, and I'm going to get this number wrong, but I'm going to say it's somewhere around 1,500 stores qualify for site visits today across all brands. I believe we have about 400 or 500 stores that qualify at Team Velocity. So that number has climbed as we made some campaign changes with feedback from our Google team. But it is purely a security component. That's why it doesn't apply to everybody. They can't take any chance that you can identify an individual consumer coming onto your lot based on a campaign structure you have or anything like that. So there's no begging or pleading or anything. You just need to get more people visiting your store, and if you do that, then you'll qualify faster.
All right. Gene would like to know, how do you track in-store visits and analytics? I'm not familiar with where that shows up in analytics, but I can tell you if you go into AdWords, and you need to be, I believe, in the old version of AdWords. I'm not sure if you can see this data in the new version yet. It's under the custom columns, there is a special conversion type, and it'll show up as store visits. So you've got to get into the conversions bucket, custom columns, and store visits. And if you want to reach out afterwards, I'd be happy to have one of our digital analysts kind of walk you through exactly where it is and what to look for there. All right. Well, it looks like if anybody else has any other questions, please type them in now. As of right now, Joe, that's our last question. A couple things I'd like to leave you guys with before we go is, if there's somebody else in the dealership that you feel would benefit from this information, or if you would like to see it again, you will get an email from me at tomorrow thanking you for coming. You can reply to that if you happen to be driving right now. If you're not driving right now, look at the screen. There's Joe's email address. Send him an email or reach out to him. If you have any questions, or if you'd like to see a recording, or if you'd like to see something further. If you like what you saw today, I'd like for you to come back and join us again for a future AutoSuccess webinar, and even more importantly, tell other people about it. Other people in the dealership that you feel could benefit from this and other future webinars. Please share with them how to join AutoSuccess webinars on Facebook, and then they'll be able to see each of the webinars and decide which ones they'd like to attend. Before we let everybody go today, Joe, is there anything that you would like to, anything more you'd like to share with our audience?
I don't think so. I mean, if there's still people on the call after hearing me talk for a straight hour, I'd just like to thank you for that. That's a strong effort.
Nice. Well, Joe, we hope to have you back again here soon. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day, and have a happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks, everybody.